Hello, everyone. I'm Craig Fulton with Evergreen. I'm an advisor here, and I want to make sure you get the most value out of your business. And I'm joined with my colleague, Alex Van Lent.
Hey Craig, yeah, I'm Alex. I'm a M&A professional on the Evergreen team, specifically help lead up our new acquisitions in the MSP space.
And thanks for joining, Alex. The reason I got you here is you recently published an article through Channel E2E talking about the steps in the deal, right? What it takes, what happens whenever you decide to sell your business and go through every piece of that. Now, what I want to just emphasize to everyone tuned in right now is, even though we're talking this through like it's a task list on a like what may sound like on a service ticket helping a customer, we don't look at it that way. This is not a transaction. We understand this is very personal. This is your business. And we just want to make sure that there's no anxiety or uneasiness because this is a very stressful thing, like selling a house.
Yeah.
Things pop up, but we just want to demystify this process and what happens. So, Alex, I know you've done dozens of these. Let's get started. So, how does this whole thing even start?
Yeah, Craig, 100%. And just to even double down on what you said, that sometimes this process can take years, sometimes it can take weeks. I think the goal of this really is that there's a couple key components that you should expect throughout this process. And yeah, there is this little mystique to it. If you've never sold a business before, you don't know exactly how it's always going to work.
Right.
But the first step generally is always just to reply to that email, answer that person who's standing in front of you, whatever it is, and just have an introductory call. I think you need to get to know each other at a high level, and you need to see if there's a fit for what you're both looking for. I would treat it almost how you would treat a first date, right? So, maybe start with some small talk, but then just see if what you care about is aligned. Is your business going to be a fit for what they're looking to do? Is their strategy going to be a fit for what you want for your business, for your people? Is it going to solve for your financial goals? All of those things.
Yeah.
I think some things you might get asked are just to tell them a little bit about the history of your business. They might get into a little bit of some of your base financial numbers, your revenue, your EBITDA for the last year, and just maybe some things about your operations and your team. But you should also focus on asking them some questions, right? You want to know what their plans are for your business after close. You want to know what their general timeline looks like. How are they structuring deals? All of that's important, just to get off right on the bat.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I've done several of these calls, if not 100 now. And I know what's really important is just the getting to know each other. That, if you're tuned into this and you own a business, we get it. You've put decades into building that up. You've had teams that have helped you get there. You've had customers that have helped you get there. And and it's important to make sure you're appreciated for that. So we get through the first call, the date's over. What's that second one look like, Alex? Then what happens?
Yeah, yeah. If you're not dumping each other right off the bat there, I think now it's time to take a little bit of a deeper look, get an NDA in place, and exchange some initial data. Ultimately, the numbers are going to be a big part of this, and you want to see if things make sense on a deeper level than just what you talked about in your first
Right.
call. I think that this is an important one, and maybe some tips for a seller, just ahead of this whole process, get your house in order. I think some analogy that I like to use occasionally is if you're going to sell your house, you'd probably tidy up beforehand. So make sure your financials are clean. It's going to be one of the major ways that a buyer evaluates your business and develops their opinion. And having things like your revenue categorized correctly and having COGS to match your revenue, all of that can give a really good impression of maturity of your business to a buyer. But yeah, generally that next step is just to have this NDA and data exchange so you can speak more freely and get to holistically understand the business a little better.
Yeah, and that NDA, not a lot of people have signed those before, and that's just to make sure both parties are protected, right? You don't want a potential buyer sharing your information, and on the buyer side, they don't want the potential seller sharing with others. This is how they do it, right? Because it's kind of like just like an MSP or a business works with its customers. We got to make sure we protect that. So we get through that step. Now, right, the buyer is going to take that data and what's going to happen?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. And it'll differ from buyer to buyer, but say a couple weeks after exchanging data, the buyer's had some time to dig in and come up with their questions, see if there's anything they need clarification on. It's time to schedule a follow-up call. So usually this will be a slightly longer set call than the initial one, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. And really what the goal of this is just to make sure that everyone is viewing things the same way, that the buyer understands what's going on in the business. So there might be questions around, hey, what's being captured in this line if it's ambiguously named, or hey, why has this line been declining over the years, or why is there a giant spike in April in your managed services? Anything along those lines, you want to just make sure that you're aligned on. It's also just a chance to explain anything more in detail, or for you to ask any follow-up questions you didn't get a chance to ask on the first call. But yeah, generally this isn't too painful of a process, and a lot of the questions you just know right away, but it's just not apparently clear to a buyer when they're looking at the numbers without getting a little more voiceover on what's actually happening.
And this is typically done with a call or two, right? And once that's all been clarified, then what happens now?
Yeah. So let's say that, everyone's on the same page and it's a good fit here for the buyer. Then the next step would be to present you with an LOI. So an LOI, or a letter of intent, is
Yeah.
an initial offer to acquire a business. Really what it does is it outlines, some key components of what a deal would look like. So it would have the valuation that they're going to be putting on the business for the purchase price, how that's structured, how much is in cash, how much is maybe in an earnout, anything along those lines. And it'll also outline what their proposed process is. So how long is the exclusivity period for them to conduct diligence and confirm what the numbers they're putting in the LOI that they've gotten from the previous conversations in the management call and the financial call. So really what this LOI is you're agreeing on terms to do the deal at, and then setting forth a plan to confirm those terms throughout a diligence period. For us,
Right.
it's usually 60 days. Sometimes a little bit longer. Sometimes it can be shorter. It depends deal by deal.
Okay. And I know a lot of these details we shared in another YouTube video that we have with Sydney Hockett, where we talk about different types of deal structures. So we don't need to get into that. If you tuned in and you want to hear that, I'll put a link in the description of that too. So you're going to see that Channel EDE article down there along with that. Now, due diligence. That sounds scary, maybe, right? So let's demystify that. Talk me through that, Alex.
Yeah. So this is probably the part of the process that people are the least familiar with. You may have had pre-LOI conversations before, but really what happens after you sign an LOI? This is where what we talked about before, confirmation of everything that you thought pre-LOI. So the first part of this is really going to be an even more fulsome data dump with your buyer, or with the person that you've been talking to. This can be everything from revenue by customer, by type, by month, to even just your organizational structure, your org chart, anything along those lines. It's just a big data dump with your buyer, and then they're going to go through it, and then you're going to have a longer set management meeting. So this would be a more in-depth meeting to go through really nitty financial stuff and just your overall operations, post-close strategy, everything in there. Probably a 3-4 hour meeting. Then a buyer is also generally going to use some external service providers. So
Right.
one of those is for something called the quality of earnings. Quality of earnings is for us, we use an outsourced consulting firm. They come in and do what we would like to call a mini audit on the business, just to really validate that the accounting is right, that the numbers that we thought pre-LOI are accurate, and what they would come up with is an EBITDA that hopefully matches what you were underwriting in the LOI. Some other aspects of diligence can be customer diligence. Usually this will be done by a blinded third-party provider. It can be anything from like an NPS survey for some of your customers, just to make sure that no one's churning in the near future and that everyone's happy. Usually this is a really small lift, and there's no mention of an acquisition. It's done on a third-party blinded basis. And then also there's some legal diligence that'll happen. So doing some confirmation on the general legal structure, making sure that there's no litigation that's currently happening, cyber insurance, all of those things. And then ultimately legal providers will help with the next stage, the most exciting stage, which would be closing the deal.
Okay. Yeah, we've reached the end of the journey, right? The closing. And, at Evergreen, this is a pretty uneventful but exciting at the same time, right? Because we have a decentralized model, there's not a ton of integration. The closing can be what the seller wants it to be. Do you want a big announcement? You want us to get out in the media? Do you want press releases? Some choose like, hey, we just need this to be quiet and kind of go through. I don't want to disrupt my customer base, or, I haven't made any announcements to the employees yet, right? Like, this is how this goes.
Yeah. So the actual functional aspect of close is pretty underwhelming. It's usually a couple minute long call where lawyers release signatures, but the most exciting part is when the funds hit your bank account and you
Yeah.
get to celebrate the years of hard work you put into building a business. What comes after that is exactly what you said. It can take a couple different forms. You know your business best, and so ultimately you have to make the right decisions on how you tell your employees, how you tell your customers.
Yeah.
Generally, we found that it hasn't been too big of an issue. But yeah, it's an exciting day and moment for everybody. And
Yeah.
it takes a long time to build a business, and it also can be a strenuous process and a stressful process to go through selling it. But it's time to really rejoice in all the hard work that went into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't just pass right up the money part. Like, look, um, we're all on a mission here to do great things, be a permanent home for business, make sure we're a good fit for people. But yes, it's very exciting to look at that screen and see that. And it's just kind of I enjoy hearing people's stories of when they see that, a whole range of emotions. So Alex, appreciate you taking us through that journey. Do you have any last words for the audience?
No, thanks, Greg. Appreciate the
Yeah.
time today too. And yeah, I think if anyone has any questions, and would love to talk about the process.
Yeah, reach out, comment down there if you have anything else. I want to thank you for demystifying what that's like. And I want to thank everyone for being tuned in. We'll see you next time.